The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over the quiet suburban street as I pulled into my driveway. I'd had a long day at work, and all I wanted was to kick off my shoes, crack open a beer, and let the familiar chaos of my dog Max greet me. His routine was clockwork paws scrabbling against the hardwood, a deep, joyful bark, and then a whirlwind of black and tan fur barreling into me like I'd been gone for years instead of 8 hours. That was Max, a German shepherd with more energy than sense and a heart bigger than the house we shared. But that evening, as I turned the key in the lock and pushed the door open, something was wrong. The house was silent. Too silent. Max! My voice echoed through the empty, levying room. No response. My stomach twisted, a flicker of unease sparking in my chest. I dropped my keys on the counter and started searching under the couch where he sometimes napped, behind the armchair he liked to squeeze into despite his size, even the laundry room where he'd once hidden after chewing up my favorite sneakers. Nothing. The unease grew into full-blown panic as I noticed something else. His leash, the bright red one I always hung by the back door, was gone. I bolted outside, scanning the yard. The gate was shut tight, the fence intact, no gaps, no signs of a struggle. Max wasn't a digger, and he sure as hell wasn't smart enough to unlatch the gate himself. My mind raced. Someone had taken him. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, cold dread settling over me as I tried to figure out who would do something so cruel. And then it clicked. There was one person in this neighborhood who'd always had it out for me. One person twisted enough to pull a stunt like this. Patricia Henley, the self-appointed dictator of our homeowners association. Everyone called her HOA Trish behind her back, though never to her face. She was a wiry woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, always armed with a clipboard and an encyclopedic knowledge of every petty rule in the HOA handbook. She made my life hell ever since I'd moved in 3 years ago, finding me for a mailbox that was too modern, harassing me over the height of my grass, even complaining that Max barked too loudly when he chased squirrels. I clashed with her more times than I could count, each encounter Leah VYing me fuming and her smirking like she'd won some in VY Cybele War. Stealing Max? That was a new low, even for her. I didn't waste time. I marched straight to her house. 2 doors down, my fists clenched so tight my knuckles ached. The streetlights buzzed overhead as I pounded on her door, the sound reverberating through the quiet evening. No answer. I knocked again, harder, and caught a twitch in the curtains. She was in there. Finally, the door creaked open, and there she stood, arms crossed, lips curled into that infuriating smug smile she always wore. "Evening, Daniel," she drawled, tilting her head like I was some lost delivery boy instead of the guy she'd been tormenting for years. "What brings you here? Where's Max?" I demanded, my voice tight with barely contained rage. She blinked, feigning confusion. "Max? Oh, you mean that dog of yours? The one that's always barking at nothing. Cut the crap, Trish. He's gone. His leash is missing. You got a problem with me. Fine, but you don't touch my dog." Her smile widened, slow and deliberate, and I knew right then she was behind it. "Oh, Daniel, that's awful. But, I did see a stray wandering around earlier today. Poor thing looked so neglected, dirty fur, no tags. I couldn't just leave it out there, so I did the responsible thing and took it in. My blood boiled. Max isn't a stray. You know damn well he's mine." She shrugged, completely unfazed. "Well, he wasn't wearing a collar when I found him. And the HOA rules, pets, without proper identification, can't just roam free. I was doing the neighborhood a favor. Besides, I've already called animal control. They'll sort it out." I took a step closer, my voice dropping to a dangerous low. "Give me back my dog, Trish. Now." She leaned against the doorframe, eyes glinting with amusement. "Oh, I'd love to help, but it's out of my hands. If animal control decides he's abandoned, well, maybe I'll keep him. He's taken quite a liking to me." That was it. I wanted to shove past her, tear through her house, and grab Max myself, but I knew that's what she wanted. She'd have the cops on me in seconds, spinning some story about me trespassing. She'd planned this, weaponized the rules against me like she always did. This wasn't just about Max. It was personal. I stepped back, jaw clenched, hands trembling. "This isn't over," I said through gritted teeth. Her smile didn't falter. "I'm sure it's not." With that, she shut the door in my face. I stood there for a moment, the rage boiling inside me, threatening to spill over. But I couldn't let her win out like this. I turned and stormed back to my house, my mind racing. If Trish thought I'd just roll over, she was dead wrong. She'd stolen my dog, my best friend, and I'd move heaven and earth to get him back. The first thing I did was check my security cameras. I'd installed them last year after Trish tried to find me for unauthorized yard equipment. It was a rake. The footage was gold clear as day. There she was at 2:17 p.m., strolling up to my fence with a piece of bacon in her hand. Max, trusting as always, trotted right over, tail wagging like she was his new best friend. She clipped a leash on Himmy, leash in, walked off like she owned the damn place. I rewatched it 3 times, my hands shaking with fury. This wasn't just theft, it was premeditated. She'd been waiting for her chance. I uploaded the video to my phone. It was my ace, but I needed more. I knocked on my neighbor Jake's door, the guy who lived across from Trish. He was a laid-back mechanic in his 40s, perpetually grease-stained and perpetually unimpressed by HOA drama. He answered after a minute, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Hey, man," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Did you see anything weird today? About Max?" Jake squinted, then nodded. "Yeah, saw Trish walking him this afternoon. Thought maybe you'd asked her to or something." "She stole him," I said flatly. "Caught it on camera." His eyebrows shot up. "No shit. That's messed up. Trish has always been a nutcassitry to find me once caused my trucks too loud. You need me to back you up? Would you? If I take this to the HOA or animal control, I need witnesses." "Yeah, man, I've got your back." Everyone's sick of her crap. I thanked him and headed home, my plan taking shape. Trish had spent years lording over this neighborhood, enforcing her petty rules like some tyrant. Now she crossed a line, and I wasn't just getting Max back, I was taking her down. Sleep didn't come that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Trish's smug face, heard Max's confused whimpers. He was so close, just a few houses away, but out of reach. The next morning, I called animal control, explained the situation, and sent them the video. I thought it'd be simple, show the proof, get my dog. But the officer on the phone was maddeningly neutral. "Sir, I get that you're upset," he said, "but if she's claiming she found a stray and has paperwork, it's not straightforward. We can't just seize an animal without verifying ownership. It might be a civil matter." "She stole him." I snapped. "I've got video of her taking him from my yard." "I understand, but if she's filed adoption papers, we need to investigate. We'll send someone out, but you might need to take this to court." I hung up furious. Trish had thought this through legal loopholes, bureaucratic red tape. She wasn't just petty, she was cunning. I couldn't wait for animal control to drag their feet. I had to see Max for myself. I waited until I saw Trish leave her house, probably off to terrorize someone else. The second her car disappeared around the corner, I walked past her yard, heart pounding. At first, it was quiet, too quiet. Then I heard it, a low, muffled whine. I crouched by her fence, peering through a gap. There he was, Max, lying in her backyard, head on his paws. His tail gave a weak wag when he saw me, but he didn't jump up like usual. He looked defeated. My chest tightened. I could have climbed over right then, grabbed him and run, but her cameras would catch me. She'd twisted into me, breaking in. I forced myself to step back, whispering, "Hold on, buddy. I'm coming for you." Legal routes were too slow, so I went dirty. If Trish wanted to play this game, I'd beat her at it. I started digging into every HOA rule she'd ever enforced, every violation she'd committed. It didn't take long to find dirt. Years ago, she'd built an illegal shed in her backyard, technically against HOA guidelines, but she'd bullied the board into ignoring it. Then there were the HOA fees. A neighbor had once complained she'd lost his payment, only for it to mysteriously reappear after he threatened legal action. She was skimming money, I was sure of it. I didn't stop there. I talked to neighbors, casually bringing up Max. The floodgates opened. Everyone had a Trish story fines for unapproved flower pots, harassment over kids' toys left in yards. Even a guy she'd threatened to evict because his car leaked oil once. She'd ruled through fear, but now that fear was turning into anger. I had an army forming. Next, I went nuclear. I compiled everything the VY the neighbor testimonies, the financial discrepancies, and posted it to the neighborhood Facebook group. I laid it bare. Tricia's theft of Max, her abuses of power, her hypocrisy. The response was instant. Comments poured in, people sharing their own horror stories, calling for her head. Trish tried to fight back, posting a sanctimonious rant about maintaining community standards, but it was too late. The tide had turned. Then the board stepped in. A few members contacted me privately, admitting they'd suspected Trish of misconduct for years, but lacked the backbone to act. With the VY and the neighborhood uproar, they finally grew a spine. An emergency HOA meeting was called. Trish had no idea the storm coming her way. The night before the meeting, I saw her pacing her porch, phone to her ear, voice sharp and frantic. She was losing it, scrambling to hold on her crumbling empire. I watched from my window, a grim satisfaction settling in. She'd terrorized us for years, belie VYing she was untouchable. Now she was about to learn what happens when you push too far. The meeting was packed standing room only. Trish sat up front, trying to look composed, but her hands fidgeted with her clipboard. I stood up first, played the VY of her stealing Max. Gasps rippled through the room. She tried to interrupt, but the board silenced her. Then the board dropped the hammer. They'd launched an investigation into her financial misconduct. By the end, the vote was unanimous. Trish was out as HOA president, and a motion to evict her was on the table. She turned to me, eyes blazing. "You did this. You did it to yourself." I shot back. As if on cue, animal control knocked. With the HOA ruling and the pressure mounting, Trish had no choice. Max was mine again. I walked out of that meeting with him at my side, his tail wagging like a metronome on overdrive. I knelt down, letting him tackle me with slobbery kisses. The nightmare was over for now. Trish didn't go quietly. The next morning, I found a bogus violation notice on my door, something about my porch light being too bright. Other neighbors got hit too, fines for nonsense like excessive bird feeder noise. She was lashing out, desperate to claw back control. I confronted her in her yard, where she stood with her clipboard like a deposed queen. "Stop it, Trish," I said, holding up the notice. "You're done." She smirked, adjusting her sunglasses. "You think you've won? I'll be here long after you're gone. You're delusional. The board's against you. The neighborhood's against you. Pack your bags." For a split second, fear flashed in her eyes, but she buried it. "We'll see," she said, turning away. I wasn't done digging. I tracked down former residents, people Trish had driven out. Their stories were chilling. She'd forced one family into foreclosure with endless fines, evited another over fabricated violations. Then I hit the jackpot. An old lawsuit from a couple she'd scammed, buried under a settlement. She'd been embezzling HOA funds for years. I took it all to the board with a clear message: act, or you're complicit. At the next meeting, they laid it out: financial fraud, abuse of power, the works. Trish tried to fight, but the EVY was a tidal wave. The board voted her out and gave her 30 days to leave. She stormed out, screaming about lawsuits, but it was over. Animal control returned Max that night, and the neighborhood exhaled. The weeks that followed were chaos. Trish barricaded herself in her house, sent threatening emails, even called the news claiming persecution. No one bought it. The sheriff finally dragged her out, her yelling fading into the distance as she drove off. The for sale sign went up the next day, and we threw a block party to celebrate. Months later, a letter arrived, Trish's handwriting, a bitter tirade blaming me for her downfall. I tossed it in the trash without a reply. Then Linda, my neighbor, showed me a VY Trish in her new neighborhood, trying to boss people around. They laughed her off. No HOA, no rules. She was powerless, a tyrant without a throne. Sitting on my porch with Max snoring at my feet, I smiled. We'd won. The neighborhood was free and life was good again. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.